Hello everyone, for Telestar, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. Thanks for joining us. We begin here in Venezuela, where the campaign for December the 6th parliamentary elections has officially opened here. Some 19 million Venezuelans are registered to vote. Now they'll have to choose between the candidates of the two main coalitions or several other parties. The Venezuelan United Socialist Party and its 31 allied movements are promising to defend the gains of the Bolivarian Revolution, while the opposition Mood Alliance of 20 organizations says it wants change.
They've been using the parallel dollar to undermine investment and production and have a negative impact on people's pockets. But people need to realize that these elections are tremendously important for the future of Venezuela.
What's at stake on December the 6th is this country's democracy. We need to elect a big majority of members at the assembly, maybe 90%, who are with the president and will defend the social missions, education, and culture.
Today marks 30 years since a volcanic mudslide buried the town of Armero in Colombia. Now, the mudslide was caused by the explosion of the Nevado Ruiz volcano. Even though experts had warned the government to take action months before the tragedy, no one expected that the mudslide would wipe out the entire town. Almost 30,000 people died in that tragedy. The images of that rescue mission shocked the world. To talk more about 30 years later after the Armero tragedy in Colombia, we turn to our correspondent Natalia Margarita. Natalia, thanks for joining us. I'm wondering, how are people remembering this anniversary of, and how are they mourning the tragedy there in Colombia? Are there going to be events there? How are they doing it?
Yeah, in fact, since yesterday, Cody, for instance, the National Symphonic Orchestra offered a concert right there in the place of the tragedy in Armero town, some 160 kilometers northeast of Bogota. So, as I said before, they offered this concert in the memory of the nearly 30,000, around 30,000 victims of this tragedy. Now, today, as we commemorate the 30 years of this tragedy, there are many activities taking place there. Among them, the screening of documentaries that have been produced on this tragedy, on the events that day, and also commemorations for the children, not just the children that lost their lives, but also those children that lost their parents. Many of the victims also are survivors, are gathering there in Armero today after 30 years. Now, President Juan Manuel Santos is expected to visit the place not today but tomorrow in order to pay respect to the victims of those events, Cody.
Now, the authorities there, Natalia, they've been held responsible for the tragedy. Some say it really could have been prevented. Update us and sort of fill us in here on the legal proceedings against officials for what happened.
We're talking here more about political responsibility, and yes, in fact, the victims, the survivors, have said that they blame directly the back then President Belisario Betancourt. They said that, in fact, all those victims could have been prevented if the government would have taken seriously the alerts that were issued ahead of the tragedy. Let's remember that geologists, institutions of geology, talk about this tragedy, announced in a way this tragedy ahead of the events. Also, for instance, volcanic ashes were covering the whole town ahead of the mudslide that killed thousands of people. So they, especially directly, President Belisario Betancourt has been blamed. Right today, victims that have been speaking in national media outlets, they insist that 30 years after President Belisario, the back then President Belisario Betancourt, should be held accountable for negligence and omissions that led to the death of thousands of people during those events, Cody.
Very quickly, Natalia, 30 years later, do we know if Colombia is more prepared to respond to natural disasters like that one?
It has been said that definitely the Armero tragedy set a precedent, Cody. Actually, I insist in the survivors, they said that it's a kind of a shame that a tragedy of such magnitude had to happen so that Colombia start taking seriously risk management in regard to natural disasters. However, for instance, the president, the governor of Tolima department, that is the State Department where Armero is located, said today that we still need to advance much further in developing a strong risk culture so that we can assess, evaluate, and properly prevent natural disasters, or how we manage natural disasters. So to sum it up, I would say that it definitely set a precedent, but we still need to advance further in this cultural risk management.
30 years later, after the tragic death of almost 30,000 people, such a staggering number, Natalia. Thanks so much.
Back to you, Kurt.
And meanwhile, the Colombian president, Juan Manuel Santos, has announced that a referendum to approve or reject a final peace agreement with the FARC guerrillas will definitely be held next year. Santos said the vote could come as early as May or June next year. It would allow Colombians to express their opinion on the current peace process being negotiated in Havana. However, the result will not be legally binding. That is one reason why the FARC guerrillas are opposing the referendum. The leader of the rebel group responded to both the government's announcement of a referendum and its ultimatum to reach a final agreement by the March 2016 deadline. Via Twitter, Timoleon Jimenez told President Santos that if the deadline cannot be changed, nor should Colombia's Congress be able to change the terms of any agreement reached in Havana. The Colombian Congress has been debating various measures that have not been discussed at the peace talks. Activists and students in Mexico are set to hold a solidarity march after the recent clash between police and students from Ayotzinapa. For more on that story, we turn to our correspondent, Clayton Kahn.
Sharp reactions continue to emerge after Guerrero State Police attacked with a high degree of brutality and violence a group of roughly 150 students from the Ayotzinapa Teacher Training College 2 days ago on the highway just outside of the Guerrero community, Tixla, where the school is located. Now, the attack left 13 students arrested, 8 injured, and 4 seriously. Yesterday, in a press conference, a commission of the students, human rights defenders, and families of the disappeared 43 expressed their outrage and deep concern over what they say are growing acts of intimidation and criminalization towards the Ayotzinapa students at the hands of state authorities under the newly acting governor, Héctor Astudillo. Vidulfo Rosales, one of the Tlachinolan Human Rights Center defenders, said that the new governor is seeking to squash the Ayotzinapa movement in their demand for the return alive of their 43 missing comrades. Although the governor Astudillo did lament the excessive force by state police, he did reaffirm his position that the students will face the heavy hand of the law if they continue to commandeer vehicles for their protests. Now, finally today, a march is to be carried out by the Ayotzinapa students from their school in Ayotzinapa to the state capital Chilpancingo, which is about 40 minutes by vehicle, in reaction to this heavy-handed police response on Wednesday. This is Clayton Kahn reporting for Telesur here in Mexico City.
Hundreds of Brazilians took to the streets in Rio de Janeiro to protest against corrupt lawmakers, especially Eduardo Cunha, the Speaker of the lower house of the Brazilian Parliament. Now, Cunha is currently overseeing a parliamentary debate on legislation to ban the morning after pill and reduce access to abortions for rape victims. The protests oppose the bill and want Cunha to resign. He is currently charged with corruption. You'll remember that. He's charged with corruption by the Attorney General. Brazilian authorities have announced a preliminary fine of $66 million for the companies responsible for the mining disaster in Minas Gerais. The announcement comes the day after both companies responsible for the accident, Vale and BHP, sent engineers and executives to visit the site and announced a fund to help the people of the affected area. Now, President Dilma Rousseff explained that the fine is a preliminary penalty based on their violation of federal laws. Local elections are set to be held on Sunday in Paraguay. The municipal elections are considered a crucial test for President Horacio Cartes' government. One of the most disputed local governments is the capital city of Asunción, where the center-left candidate Mario Ferrero is challenging the ruling party. WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram, they're not traditionally associated with teaching, but some schools in Bolivia are starting to use those social media apps to help teach students there. Our correspondent Dimitri O'Donnell now reports from La Paz.
In most schools, cell phones are strictly forbidden during class, but not at this one. Students and teachers here are embracing apps like WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram as a new way to learn.
We are in the 21st century. It is time to change. It is time to use these new technologies because many of us are addicted to smartphones.
So how does this new way of teaching work? Students and teachers form WhatsApp and Facebook groups online. Teachers then set tasks and projects, and students hand in their homework online. The next day, the test results are announced publicly and the homework shared amongst classmates. During class, students can chat with their teacher, not verbally, but in cyberspace to get their feedback.
For me, WhatsApp is very important because you form this relationship with the teacher, which gives the student confidence. And not only do you have a teacher, but you have a friend.
The teacher sets us exams, and we have 12 hours to turn them in. So we can do them after school, in any place with internet, at any time. We have free time.
A Bolivian law currently bans the use of smartphones in school, but teachers say it's outdated and needs to be reformed. They say specialized education apps like Edmodo are replacing traditional forms of teaching, and the results are improving.
There is this law, but the children are still bringing their cell phones to school. The role of the teachers to use the tools they have at their disposal. There are thousands of educational applications that you can use in natural sciences, social sciences, or math class. I have used the most relevant ones to teach my subject.
Classes like this one are now only taking off in Bolivia, but they're becoming such a success that Congress is debating a law allowing the use of new technologies and social networks in schools. They hope the next generation of students will fare even better. So it seems social media will soon become a permanent fixture in Bolivian classrooms, something the students like very much. Dimitri O'Donnell, Telesur, La Paz.
ISIL executioner known as Jihadi John has been targeted by the U.S. More on the effort to take him out when we come back. On Thursday evening, clashes erupted between Turkish authorities and Kurd protesters in the Gazi district of Istanbul. Hundreds of people protest against the so-called counter-terror activities carried out by the Turkish authorities in the area. As a result of the operation, at least 5 people from the PKK have been killed, along with several members of the youth wing of PKK. 1 soldier and 1 police officer were reportedly killed, while several others were injured as a result of the clashes. And in a significant breakthrough, Kurdish Iraqi forces have defeated the Islamic State in the city of Sinjar. The Kurdish militias, with backing from the government and U.S.-led airstrikes, recaptured the strategic town, which had been under Islamic State control since last year. Analysts say the successful offensive could provide critical momentum in efforts to defeat ISIL there. British ISIS militant Mohammed Imwasi, better known as Jihadi John, has been targeted by a U.S. military drone strike. The airstrike took place in the Islamic State stronghold city of Raqqa. Imwasi participated in the beheading videos of 2 American journalists and the killing of several other captives, including 1 person from the United Kingdom. Speaking outside Downing Street, Britain's Prime Minister said the UK had been working with the United States to track Imwasi down. The Prime Minister of Lebanon held an emergency meeting with his security cabinet and military chiefs. Now, it comes in the aftermath of the double suicide bombing that took place there on Thursday. The nation is currently in mourning after over 40 people were killed and hundreds more injured by the bombing claimed by the Islamic State. On Saturday, diplomatic officials from some 20 countries will come together for talks on Syria. Now, these are the most significant talks since Geneva talks were held last year. The United States Secretary of State, John Kerry, however, says a substantial agreement will be difficult to obtain.
I cannot say this afternoon that we are on the threshold of a comprehensive agreement. No, there remains a lot of work to be done. The walls of mistrust within Syria, within the region, within the international community are thick and they are high.
According to election officials, Myanmar's opposition party, the National League for Democracy, has won in a landslide election victory there, with more than 80% of contested seats now declared. Aung San Suu Kyi's party has more than the two-thirds it needs to choose the president, ending decades of military-backed rule there. This election was seen as the first openly contested poll in Myanmar in 25 years. Austria announces plans to erect an over 2-mile-long metal fence along its border with Slovenia. Now, according to the country's Interior Minister, the fence will be used to better manage the influx of refugees, and barbed wire will be stored in containers nearby to be installed if needed. Now, the announcement comes after Slovenia began erecting razor wire along its frontier with Croatia, citing similar reasons. A disturbing story now coming out of Germany, where on Thursday the bodies of 7 babies were found in an apartment located in the southern state of Bavaria. Now, it is not clear how long the bodies had been in the apartment or exactly how those babies died. Examinations are underway, but the bodies are in poor condition. That means that the process could take some time. Police are searching for a 45-year-old woman who was the previous tenant of the property for questioning. On Thursday, the United Nations Security Council voted to stop the ongoing violence in Burundi. The Security Council reports that since April, the government there has been targeting the opposition when President Pierre Nkurunziza announced he would be running for a controversial third term. On Wednesday, key diplomats discussed the possible deployment of international peacekeepers to Burundi if the violence there escalates. South Africa's Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has been issued a court summons over the massacre of 34 striking mine workers by police at Marikana in 2012. A lawyer has accused Ramaphosa of being partially responsible for the decision to forcibly remove the miners during a prolonged strike. During closing arguments, the lawyer stated that his call to the South African Police Service acted as a trigger for the deadly crackdown. Now, Ramaphosa, who was exonerated earlier this year by a judicial commission, was a non-executive director and shareholder at the company that owned the mine. Suspending Russia from participating in athletics won't solve anything. Now, that's according to Russian track and field athlete Maria Kuchina. During an interview on Thursday in Russia, the gold medalist called for efforts to tackle doping on an international level. She added that the athletes who are involved in the doping scandal should be responsible for their own mistakes. On Thursday, 80-year-old Mexican novelist Fernando del Paso was awarded the Cervantes Prize, considered to be the most prestigious Spanish language literary prize. Now, Del Paso is considered one of the greatest examples of Mexican literature and is known for his innovative work that combines modern elements with tradition. That's what we're covering on what is a Friday afternoon here in Caracas. Plenty more on all of those stories and others on our website, telesurtv.net/English. Be sure also to check us out on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.